Can I buy you guys a drink? Guess not.
Patrick Swayze is
Dalton.
I thought you'd be bigger.
Opinions vary.
When he's around, anything can happen.
How does a guy like you end up a bouncer?
Just lucky, I guess.
And usually does.
If somebody gets in your face, I want you to be nice.
Don't be rude! Ask him to walk, but be nice. Help this gentleman to the door.
Until it's time to not be nice.
So says the fighting philosopher.
He may be hard to handle.
I keep talking, you're gonna go off thinking I'm a nice guy.
I know you're not a nice guy.
But he's easy to like.
What's the matter, Dalton? Don't you like women?
The worst I ever had was wonderful.
He's not what you'd expect.
I thought you'd be bigger.
But there's one thing you can count on. He's the best friend a good time ever had.
You guys tired?
Doc, I'll get all the sleep I need when I'm dead. This is my town.
I'm not afraid of him.
I guess you'll be having that fire sale now, all right? You got your hands full, kid.
I just think I'm looking at a dead man.
Patrick Swayze.
For that line of work, I thought you'd be bigger.
Gee, I've never heard that before.
Oh my God. As I was watching this legendary film that I've watched hundreds of times, I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and she goes, "What's a roadhouse?" And it's a thought that I don't think I ever had. So I told her, I was like, I guess it's just a bar. But she goes, "Isn't there like a restaurant?" And I said, "Yes, there is." Good point. And there's peanuts on the floor. I believe that's Texas Roadhouse.
That's the thing, yeah.
So I wanted to go, before we get too deep and before we talk about who we are, let's talk about what a roadhouse is. Now, roadhouse has many different things. Mainly it is a roadside bar, like a dive bar on the side of the road. Picture Route 66, you pull over, there's a spot to get drink with some locals, on your drive, stop and get some beer and then keep driving. But one thing I found pretty interesting is the Urban Dictionary for roadhouse. It's taken on some cultural cachet within our now world, and you might say something like, "Dude, you fell down the stairs and pissed on the rug last night." You might respond by saying, "Roadhouse." Now that's one. It's a badass one-word response that can be applied to a variety of situations. But perhaps my favorite one is a roadhouse is when you take 2 shits in one trip to the bathroom. But you do it in 2 sittings. Have you ever heard this, Marcus?
I have not. I can tell you in all my research, I didn't think to look up the most obvious thing, like what is a roadhouse? And I love the 2 shits.
Well, the name is derived from the movie Roadhouse because the club is called the Double Deuce.
Sure. Okay, that
so
makes sense.
It's when you go to the bathroom, it's very specific. Go to the bathroom, sit on the toilet, take a shit, wipe, get up, pull your pants up, wash your hands, and just before you leave, you think, "Oh, I got one more." Now, you have to sit on the toilet for a second shit, a double deuce, or a roadhouse. Example, what took you so long? You were in the bathroom for a really long time. I would have been done sooner, but I had to shit twice. Oh, man, a roadhouse? That happened to me last week.
So you have to complete the act of the first shit. You have to zip up, wash hands. You can't just
No,
think
it
you
has
finished.
to be a complete. Yeah.
Okay.
You need a complete series of events to happen before you can officially have a Roadhouse. And with all that in mind, I'm Adam Marcher.
I'm Mark Hall.
We are Bullets, Bourbon, and Karate. And this week's episode is one, I think it was the first one we ever wanted to do, but it was also the scariest one to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that any movie action, span, giving a hat tip to the 90s or 80s, this is the first movie that probably comes across as, well, we got to do Roadhouse. But
you gotta do Roadhouse.
It's one of those that, it's like the Godfather of cinema. I'm not a big Godfather fan, but when talking about Godfather, you want to do it justice, right? If you're a film critic. Mm-hmm. And as with Roadhouse, if you're talking about action, if you're talking about 80s, 90s, Swayze, anybody else, you want to be sure you're doing it right and giving it justice.
Mm-hmm. And who knows if we're going to do that, but
probably
we're going to have a blast fucking talking about this wonderful movie, Roadhouse. You can find us all over the internet. We are Bullets, Bourbon, and Karate, as I said earlier. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter. We're mainly active on Instagram. And you can find us at BB Karate Podcast. And that's also our email, bbkaratepodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up with any questions or fun memories you have about Roadhouse. And now that that's out of the way, Marcus, we are Bullets, Bourbon, and Karate. We also pair a movie with a drink every week, and this is no exception. What do you drink with Roadhouse? Like we talked about, we said this movie is epic. What, my God. There's obviously a lot of alcohol in this movie. Is it a cheap beer? Is it some bottom shelf, randomly named bourbon that you're not sure where it comes from? Somebody drinks Jack Daniels, and then Marcus, you had the life-saving, brilliant idea. Why don't we drink what Dalton drinks?
Black fucking coffee.
Leaded, as they say.
Leaded.
And I have some freshly made, although I should have probably let it sit on the burner for like a couple hours. I always found that very interesting in the movie when he's like, coffee black. At this bar?
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was left there from last night and then just reheat it,
Whenever I was thinking about the coffee and, watching again Keith David pull, the coffee pot from there, or actually that wasn't Keith David, it's another guy who does a coffee bit. But it was, I immediately thought about my military days and the coffee pot in the military.
Ooh.
As far as the toilet goes, I would say the coffee pot was the second nastiest fucking thing in the military in my time.
If I'm not mistaken, there are 3 different people who give Dalton coffee. The first guy that does it is the one who's stealing Wesley's nephew, the mustachioed goon, Pat, thank you. There's Pat, and then the sort of buff blonde guy we don't hear much from.
Yeah.
That's the leaded and unleaded, and then Keith David. Because I picture Keith David giving him, like, now that he's been there a while, start of the night, Dalton's coming in, you get the fresh Folgers, you get him the good stuff, right? Like,
I could see Keith David like being he's an aficionado of like making sure his bar area is done properly, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I just think getting coffee from Pat, that's the coffee. Like, if Pat's in charge of wiping that bar down and cleaning it every night, I think that coffee's there for 2 days. He just hasn't gone through it because no one drinks coffee. Yeah. So every day he just turns it on, let it burn and get old.
Yeah.
Woo. But if I'm not mistaken, the only thing Dalton drinks in this movie is coffee. I don't think we ever see him drink water.
We do see him drink a beer in the diner with Wade and
you're
Kelly.
Absolutely right. When we see Sam Elliott, massive pubes.
Right.
we do see him chugging a brew. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I guess he's off the clock, so he's okay. But mostly, it's coffee. So that's what we're drinking. What are you drinking? Let's talk about Roadhouse, Marcus.
Well, here's a little rundown of the movie synopsis for Roadhouse.
Mm-hmm.
The Double Deuce is the meanest, loudest, and rowdiest bar south of the Mason-Dixon line, and Dalton, Patrick Swayze, has been hired to clean it up. He might not look like much, but the PhD-educated bouncer proves he's more than capable, busting the heads of troublemakers and turning the Roadhouse into a jumping hotspot. But Dalton's romance with the gorgeous Dr. Clay, Kelly Lynch, puts him on the bad side of cutthroat local big shot Brad Wesley, Ben Gazzara.
And I think that's absolutely accurate. So that's the synopsis. If you haven't seen Roadhouse, I envy that you get to watch it for the first time.
I know, man. That's unbelievable.
Do you remember your first experience with Roadhouse?
Oh, yes. With breast abound and everything
Oh my
too.
God.
It was
Can you imagine?
It was one of the biggest life turners for me. I watched it with my dad. And so just a couple of halls, just a couple of men just sitting around.
Was your dad separated from your mother at the time?
Yes. Yeah. It was
Okay, so
it wasn't a divorce yet. Yeah, but it wasn't
Right.
a divorce, but he was living in an apartment. And so this was prime Roadhouse
Oh my
watching
God.
material right here. And yeah,
Just
it
got
was
your Hungry Man dinners microwaved up?
Yeah, meatloaf or chicken, either one of those will do for old Dad and Mark.
And that
But,
weird fudge that they serve
yeah.
it as a dessert?
Yeah, it
that
has
no matter-
that burnt layer on top, and then
Oh.
it's always like that. You only get like one spoonful of the bottom of it,
Yeah.
and that's
And you can't, no matter how they tell you to microwave it, you can never cook a Hungry Man perfectly. Maybe you
No,
can. I just
you
I
can't.
never figured it out. Either the dessert or cobbler or whatever
yeah,
would be
the
burnt
spiced
on top,
apples.
yeah, and frozen in the middle,
Yeah,
or it would just be completely burnt and almost unedible, but you still try
right.
because you don't know any better. You're probably eating melted plastic. But anyway, so that was your first experience with this amazing movie. Do you remember specific moments from that, like looking over your father when they were having sex standing up, for God's sake?
The first moment as watching this, the first scene was bent over in the closet area, and it's the first night the Double Deuce is open, and he's banging this.
Yep.
Apparently under 21. I guess she's 18, but
We're hoping.
and they're just bent over, and he's doing her right there, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to do this when I have a chance.
This is going to be a great time. So the first time that I can remember, my youngest time, was spending the night at a friend's house. We were hanging out in his room, and his parents smoked. Coming out of his room to go to the bathroom, and there was a bunch of adults. I don't know who all was there. It must have been, in my memory, it was 3 or 4. And it was the moment Kelly Lynch stands up, and you see her ass and she walks out, and and I was like, oh no. I felt like I was doing something very wrong, like I was going to get in trouble. And I remember like some of the adults being like, uh-oh, seen that movie? Doing that sort of thing. And I was like, haha. And I remember that vividly. And then I remember sort of coming back from the bathroom, and at that point, she was sort of riding him on top, and Wesley was just sort of sitting in his rocking chair watching them have sex. And I remember going back, I was like, you know what movie they're watching? And that was my first time that but that was my first time watching it all the way through. I don't remember my first time watching it all the way through. But by the time I had watched it all the way through in one sitting, I know that I had seen several scenes from adults watching it on television or renting it.
Right.
Because when this movie came out, so when that moment of me seeing Kelly Lynch stand up, that must have been 91, probably. So I was around 7.
Yeah.
7 or 8. When this movie came out, I was 6. I certainly don't remember it, but that was my first experience with Roadhouse. I've since watched it several times, but by the time I watched it for the first time, I had seen so many scenes, so I felt like I had seen it,
Yeah. What a good ass to be introduced to.
Oh my gosh.
Movie ass. I mean, that was...
That woman was the most attractive thing I had ever laid eyes on. I think for the rest of the night, he and I would take turns going out and like seeing things. I don't think we ever saw the throat rip or anything like that, but there are vivid other scenes that I remember from that night of being like, oh, let me go get some water, or like he would go and it was like, what'd you see, and stuff like that. Like,
what'd you get? Let me show you the notes. What'd you get? Yeah.
Was there more breast? So that was mine. If you remember your first time seeing this movie, Roadhouse, hit us up at bbkaratetepodcast@gmail.com, because I think there's going to be a lot of wonderful stories attached to this specific movie, because it's like, it was such forbidden fruit. It's the type of movies that 6 adults watch while their kids are in the room playing and like, don't come out, we're going to watch this, and they're smoking, and they're drinking beer, the living room's filled with smoke.
Yeah.
It's like a Roadhouse in a living room of a cul-de-sac.
There's a card game that started, but it's ended abruptly for some reason. They didn't finish it.
I mean, we've gotten a few stories about other movies, but I'd love to hear about this one because I think it's pretty revolutionary in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just